the reports come from? Did you get an initial?
One PodVader.
That's football.
Every angle of the NFL covered.
All that kind of stuff, I get it.
This,
no question about it,
is Next Fan Up.
We're going to unleash hell here in December.
Hello and welcome to the Thursday night SuperFan Battle Edition of the Next Fan Up podcast. Hey everybody, PodVader here. It's one of our new episodes. We're trying to split things up to stretch the content out for you all week long, and hopefully, we'll see how long this lasts. We'll get the Thursday night matchup previewed on Wednesdays for you moving forward through the season. That way you'll have content ready to go, ready for kickoff Thursday night. And of course, this week we have the opener. It is the Houston Texans at the Kansas City Chiefs. It's a playoff rematch. It's the opener. The Chiefs are going to be showcasing their rings and banners and whatnot. So it's going to be a fun night, and obviously in the age of COVID, it's a night that we're all excited for and we're all getting ready for, and we're getting super excited for things to really get kicked off. And with that, we'll have the SuperFans, we'll have Nick, and we'll have James, Texans James, to preview that particular matchup. Before I throw it to them, I will let you know some of the things that you can expect this coming season. First of all, in this particular episode, I will be back at the end of the SuperFan matchup to give you my thoughts on the matchup and give you my official pick. On Thursdays, we will have our official flagship show. The SuperFan rankings will be unveiled. They will be making their official picks. I'll make my official picks on Thursdays, and we'll have a roundtable of SuperFans to help me go through every single game from for every single week of the NFL football season. On Fridays, again, this is a show that will be up in the air. We'll have the rest of the SuperFan battles to preview week one. So any of the other big matchups that are happening here in week one, like the Dolphins at the Patriots. I'm sorry, I had to laugh. The Eagles and the Washington football team, the Packers and the Vikings, or maybe the big Sunday night matchup with the Cowboys and the Rams. Maybe these will be games that will feature on that Friday show. So you'll want to tune in to see what SuperFan battles will happen on Fridays. And then we're not going to do a recap show this season. Quite honestly, I feel like most of you get your recaps either by watching Football Night in America, you're already watching the Red Zone channel, or you're getting your recaps from other places. I didn't feel that we really brought enough to you as SuperFans to provide a recap show. But what we might do is Eagles, James, and I might bring you a different type of recap show on Tuesdays, and that's a show that's in development. And I know I'm sort of promoting it now. It kind of puts me on the spot to make sure that show happens. But it's something that we're working on, and I think you'll quite enjoy it. So we're really doing what we can to spread out the content for you all week long here on Next Fan Up. With that, let's get to the content for today. It's the opening matchup. It's the NFL Kickoff. It is the Kansas City Chiefs and the Houston Texans. Here we go.
It is opening night. It is the Kansas City Chiefs and the Houston Texans, a playoff rematch kicking off the 2020 NFL season. I am Nick, your Kansas City Chiefs superfan, and I'm joined here by James, our Houston Texans superfan. How are you doing, James?
Oh, I am doing quite well, all things considered, for 2020, Nick.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those weird things. It's like whenever it comes up, like when I'm talking to a stranger that I'm a Chiefs fan, they're like, oh, wow, great. It's like, yeah, I know. It's like the one and only one good thing that happened this year. And it does seem like a very long time ago, but football is coming back. So hopefully there will be some more positives yet in store for this year.
Absolutely. You know, the last 6 months have been a long 5 years, but hopefully that still applies to the football season so we can enjoy it a little bit longer.
Yeah, and among the things that have sort of gone sideways in 2020 for you, James, I know one of those is there's been a series of Texans personnel moves this particular offseason that you have not particularly enjoyed. But I find it interesting in the way that they're going to show up in this game, in that, the big one being DeAndre Hopkins traded to the Arizona Cardinals for a pick that then got turned into Brandon Cooks, essentially. And I find it interesting in part because basically everybody lampooned the move, but whether they were being contrarian or what, some of the guys over at PFF actually made the case for it, saying that essentially it's smarter to invest essentially into three good wide receivers that can test different matchups, rather than one elite wide receiver that is going to be the focal point of your offense and therefore the focal point of the defense. And I think that's going to come into play given how shallow the Chiefs are in their secondary right now with a suspension and some unproven guys. But just, on the face of it, what do you think of that particular argument?
I mean, I can see how there's some credence to that argument. I mean, you look at what the Detroit Lions did with Calvin Johnson there, and then when he's not been there. And, it's always fun to have a great player, a very exciting player. The reason I think that argument falls apart is you look at the track record of DeAndre Hopkins, and the next game he misses will basically be his first game ever missed. So he's been incredibly healthy. He's played through just a litany of really, really bad quarterbacks. On the Slack channel, I always compare like Nuke's progression to Larry Fitzgerald. Like, how much better could he have been with, a good quarterback? And now he finally has it. And you get not just PFF, there have been other places that have Deshaun Watson is going to become an even better quarterback now because he doesn't have the crutch of DeAndre Hopkins. If you want to make the argument of paying three okay or, above average wide receivers, that's fine. But the rationale that Knob put forth was, well, we don't want to spend that much money on one guy. So instead they spent way too much money on Randall Cobb, took on a huge running back contract in David Johnson, and took on a large contract in Brandon Cooks. So you're basically taking that upside argument of PFF of, I'm going to go out and get, three wide receivers in the $10 million range instead of one in the $20 million range, or, slightly above 20 million or right around 20 million, whatever, based on his new extension. That's fine if you're getting the cheaper wide receivers or saving money there so you can spend it elsewhere. But to turn around and then overspend on these positions, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. The other fun thing, and this may play into account here this week, they will probably all actually be healthy. That's something that probably won't be able to be said for many games this year. And so it turns into that scenario of, sure, you have these three good wide receivers, you can create mismatches, but you only get to use, 1 out of 3 or 2 out of 3 throughout the course of the year. So I think they're grasping at straws. Maybe Bill O'Brien, paid the guys over at PFF to give himself some good pub. But looking at the Texans offense, it reminds me of the fantasy football owner that suddenly became the parent of triplets. And so they're the parent of 3-year-old triplets at this point. Time stood still the moment those 3 kids were born because they now have so much other things to do. And if you look at this roster from, 2017, you're like, whoa, Brandon Cooks, that's awesome. That's, okay, I can see that being maybe, as good as Nuke, especially when you pair him with the dynamic Randall Cobb. And what's this, David Johnson in the backfield? I mean, that would be a stunner by 2017 standards.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I totally agree with you. And the way that the money was spread around, whatever savings you got off of not having the premier big wide receiver contract, I'm not necessarily buying in 2020 where that went. But I still think, just looking at how these two teams are going to play each other, I think there are going to be some favorable matchups. And perhaps unfortunately for your argument, but fortunately for the Texans, they're going to probably find some tasty ones. I mean, the Chiefs are without their number one corner in Bashad Breeland, who's serving a suspension. Behind him is Trevarius Ward, who's solid, but not a lockdown guy by any stretch. But behind him is essentially a 6th rounder from last year, a 4th and a 7th rounder this year, and a special teamer that we got off the Giants. And so, having that depth at wide receiver, who at least now, for now, are all healthy, that means that, you go 5 wide, you're going to have a guy like, you're going to have Kenny Stills or Brandon Cooks against potentially a 7th-round rookie. The Chiefs are probably going to try to fill in some of those gaps by, spreading around, putting 3 to 4 safeties on the field and spreading around that depth because their safety depth's a little bit better. But they're starting free safety, Juan Thornhill's still coming back from an ACL last year, and they may have him on a pitch count. So, I think everybody is has the playoff game in their mind where the Chiefs went on this insane scoring run. But I think that there's going to be some spots that aren't going to offer a whole lot of resistance for the Texans as well. And, with Randall Cobb being, having some gadget potential and David Johnson obviously being a good pass catcher, has there been any indication of how some of these shifts are going to change the way that the Texans actually play on offense?
Bill O'Brien was quietly one of the most run-heavy, at least in the first game-scripted series of each and every game, and it turned out to be pretty okay. When we had Duke Johnson last year, it will probably go over to the more pass-heavy or hopefully at least play-action pass. Knob has turned over play-calling duties, so that will hopefully help. Yes, you can say you can have Randall Cobb, Kenny Stills, David Johnson. We somehow did not cut Kiki because he's a good player, despite the fact that Knob doesn't like him. And so typically good players that Bill O'Brien doesn't like don't last long on the Texans. But he's also an injury-prone guy, and so that must tug at the heartstrings of offensive weapon with injury problems. Probably has a soft spot for Bill O'Brien right there. What'll be interesting, and I know that this will be overtalked, is the truncated offseason. So the only carryover from last year that played any real meaningful time, you could debate it would either be Will Fuller or Kenny Stills. So you've got a new running back out of the backfield. You have 2 new wide receivers. One of them is ostensibly your primary wide receiver. And now you're relying on Deshaun Watson, who critics have come up with, he doesn't make it through his progressions as quickly as he needs to, and he ends up bailing. If I had the offensive line of the Houston Texans, one, I would no longer be alive. But for the brief period of time I would have been alive, I would also have been looking to run by the time I got to my 2nd or 3rd progression. So how is that going to play him trying to get on, still getting on the same page of these 3 new wide receivers plus the guy out of the backfield? That's probably not going to be great when I still believe you have Chris Jones and Frank Clark staring down our papier-mâché offensive line.
Yeah, and that is the part of the defense where I think that becomes the question is, given some of the mismatches between the secondary and the receivers, will the Chiefs pass rush be enough to counteract, the problems that we're going to have there? And, the Texans did beat the Chiefs in the regular season last year, and it was kind of a weird game, and it happened in the middle of the regular season when the Chiefs were still fighting a series of injuries. And among those were, I think that was a period of time when Chris Jones was still fighting through a groin issue, and Frank Clark, really was not playing as himself, dealing with a number of different ailments until about halfway through the season. And this was right before he started kind of getting back into the healthy Frank Clark that we then saw late in the season in the playoff run. And so I do think the Chiefs are going to have a pass rush that can bite a lot more than in that particular matchup. But we're just going to see. And honestly, in that game, I think a lot of people came away with the narrative that because the Texans really pounded the football on the ground with Carlos Hyde, and he racked up, 125 yards, something like that towards the end of the game. They're like, aha, see, this is one of those blueprints for beating the Chiefs is ball control football. And it wasn't so much that, other than the Chiefs just totally screwed up and had dropped passes on their, or at least missed opportunities on 3rd downs late in that game that allowed the Texans to keep moving with it. And, I think the offense that we're going to see in this game is going to be much more like the one that went on the 51-7 run in the playoff game rather than what we saw in that regular season game. And to that end, you mentioned all of the turnover on the Texans offense outside of swapping in running back Clyde Edwards-Helaire for Damian Williams and the Sean McCoy mixture that we had last time around. Basically, everything's exactly the same. But there has been at least some changes to the Texans as they try to field an adequate unit there. Has there been any improvements you've seen in terms of the shifting around that they've done on that side of the ball?
Game last year, the blueprint for beating the Chiefs was to make sure Patrick Mahomes was playing in a walking boot and not able to move about in the pocket. That it turns out is really beneficial. It's hard to game plan for that though, or hard to influence. You still only lost by a touchdown, I think. As far as the Texans defense, we somehow managed to get a little bit thinner on cornerback, which did not serve us well in the playoff game against you. It did not serve us well most of last year. It's never great when the fact that Garrett Conley going on the injured list, that special 3-week injured list, is going to be considered a blow to the depth of the secondary. So we didn't really have an answer for the Chiefs offense, during the playoffs. I don't really foresee that being the case, especially, I guess the one outside factor would be J.J. Watt was playing off a very recently recovered torn pec. You could kind of tell in the game the only time the Texans had any semblance of defense was when Watt was going as all out as he could. And then as that game went on and, the injury just kind of sapped him of his energy, we all know what 51-7 looks like in the span of 2.5 quarters. We don't need to rehash that all that much. But yeah, it definitely has that potential to just get blown up like that. The fact that our big defensive signing this year was the extension of Zach Cunningham, an inside linebacker. That's really not going to help all that much against the Chiefs, who like to spread the ball around. So, no, I guess is the short answer to did the Texans improve a lot on defense? Jadeveon Clowney does have his detractors. It's always been known that he would be a potential impact player on passing downs, that really he would be known for his rush defense. Our rush defense struggled without him last year, whenever he was out. I expect that to kind of, continue because, again, as we moved all of this money over to the offensive side of the ball, you look, not to go too much back into signings, but, you give Laramie Tunsil a blank sheet of paper and say, go ahead and write down whatever you want in your contract. And the only thing stopping him from getting more money is probably him running out of things to ask for. You overpay for Randall Cobb. You are now paying a lot of money for David Johnson. And, even the Deshaun Watson deal, I'm definitely behind. But even that's like, $2-3 million, per year, potentially over market value. Now, are any one of these deals like killers? No, but you start adding up these like, $1 million over, $2 million, $3 million over. And suddenly, the Texans are in a really bad cap situation despite not being all that good, at least for like a deep playoff run perspective. They're the team that makes the playoffs and then are unceremoniously bounced out, and yet still have a cap structure that looks more like the New Orleans Saints, with that $15 million of overspend between David Johnson, Randall Cobb, Zach Cunningham, our punter and kicker, who somehow made like $1 million over market value. And, there's either $15 million to pay Jadeveon Clowney or $15 million to, pay 2 or 3 contributors. We got Laramie Tunsil because we gave up virtually every single pick, and Bill O'Brien loves to trade these picks. You can't get cheap help on defense through the draft if you don't have draft picks. So that's kind of why everything is just another year older, and, fingers crossed that it doesn't regress too much.
Well, it's going to be a bit of a trial by fire on Thursday. And to that end, I think it's time for us to move on to some X factors here. Mine is Mecole Hardman, who is sort of a character I've been banging the table for a while. I feel like he was one of the most sort of like under the radar pieces up to the Chiefs offense last year, where just because there's so many weapons there, but he basically matched Tyreek Hill's rookie production with it in his own rookie year, but on half as many touches as Tyreek got in his first year in the system. And they kind of went away from him a little bit in the playoffs. They seemed to kind of skew their touches more towards the veterans as they went through the postseason. But he tends to figure heavily in Andy Reid gadget plays and some of the weirder stuff they like to do. And he's usually considered to be the third or fourth biggest threat, by the Chiefs have on the field. And so he tends to get favorable matchups. So I have a feeling that he's going to go off in this game. He also looks like he's going to be the team's both punt and kickoff returner. It just seems like every other game in between, about 50% of the time, the Chiefs run one back on the Texans whenever we face each other. And I think he had one really big return in the playoff game that was part of what sparked the turnaround early in that game. And so I would not be surprised to see him pop one on special teams as well.
Yeah, along a similar vein and just keeping with that consistency theme, I think the Texans, if there's going to be an X factor, will be Jarvis Landry. He was definitely picking up production towards the mid to end of last season. He's the only real holdover with the exception of Will Fuller. And so if you figure that the Chiefs are already thin in the defensive secondary, having Cooks and Fuller spread out the defense, you should be able to get Jarvis Landry a couple of touches for that over Randall Cobb. Nothing against the man personally, but given his recent production, I think Jarvis Landry is a little bit more elusive than Randall Cobb is.
Yeah, but you mean Stills?
Yes. Sorry, I'm confusing my garbage Miami wide receivers.
I was very confused there for a little bit. I was like, wait a second. Is there a good trade that Knob pulled off this offseason?
No, I've got my fantasy football stuff up, but I was just, oh yeah, Jarvis Landry, Kenny Stills. Oh yeah, we're back to that 2017, parent with triplet mindset. No, Kenny Stills in a much more accurate and predictable fashion for an X factor. Although if Jarvis Landry factors into this game, that would be quite the X factor, being he is on neither of the rosters. No, Kenny Stills, if he can get the ball in space, he could do some damage. And if that's not just like the perfect microcosm of 2020, I don't know what is.
All right, and it is then prediction time. I believe the line is 9.5, which seems, honestly, I was surprised at how wide that was, just given, the Texans did beat the Chiefs in Arrowhead during the regular season last year. But as then I started thinking about what do I want to predict, I found myself hitting exactly that line, especially because I'd be more worried about this game if it were in the middle of the season. On opening day is when Andy Reid gets to pull out some of the new magic tricks he's just been working on all offseason long. And so I'm sure he has something really weird that nobody's ever prepared for, because it's something that he just invented this offseason. And honestly, as every opening game the Chiefs have played in the last few seasons have featured something like that. And honestly, I would put a 14-point swing just purely on that factor. And so with that in mind, I think I'm predicting this game's going to be 38-28, because I do think the Texans are going to be able to put some points on the board and move the ball well, but the Chiefs are going to, they're going to come with some pixie dust, and it's just going to be a boat race.
Yeah, so I had a very similar thought, and I'm trying to remember back, because I know the Chiefs opened up the season against the Patriots, right? I vaguely recall them opening up the season against the Patriots and them being, a touchdown plus underdog to the Patriots, and then Andy Reid just doing Andy Reid things. Don't bet against Andy Reid after the bye, and don't bet against Andy Reid on the first game of the year. I saw that the over-under was 54.5. I initially double-checked to make sure that just wasn't what the Chiefs over-under was, and that wasn't the total for the game. Turns out it's the total. So they're kind of predicting, I guess, a 31-21 type game, 31-22 type game. Texans have managed to score 31 points the other two times they played the Chiefs in the previous 11 months. So I'm going to stick with that number. I think it's a good number. Texans get 31. However, I think the Chiefs end up about 42, the 42 to 45 range. I'll say 42. Yeah, I think this is going to be a complete track meet. The past several seasons have shown that defenses already get off to a slower start than offenses. I think what might slow the Texans down is just the complete overhaul of their top skill position players, with the exception of Deshaun Watson. So that could make this 31 number possibly unobtainable, but I'm hoping the Chiefs do the Texans some favors in that regard.
All right. Well, it is the Chiefs and the Texans kicking off a very important season for the NFL, because we don't know what the revenues are going to be like, or if this season is going to come to a complete conclusion, just given the times that we are in. But hopefully this thing just knocks the ratings so completely out of the park that Patrick Mahomes and more importantly, Bill O'Brien can save the NFL.
That is certainly a goal, considering one has not been able to save a franchise.
All right. Well, it's going to be a great game, and always a pleasure talking to you, James.
Good talking to you, Nick.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you, James. A number of things I want to sort of highlight from their conversation and sort of highlight things that we've been talking about all season long. Remember, if you haven't listened to any of our shows, we've done full division previews, we've done full NFL power rankings, and we've had a number of different shows over the past couple of months here to get you ready for this upcoming NFL season that will be like no other. Not to add a little extra gravitas on it, but it felt like it was necessary there. One of the things that we've been really hammering home is the teams that have the most consistency are going to have the most success, especially early on this football season. And you heard them talk about it. Kansas City has got everybody coming back. Very little turnover in terms of personnel from what that team was last year to this year. And really, the only thing I can see happening is you have a young quarterback, the richest athlete in the NFL, buying baseball teams, having already won a Super Bowl ring, going into his third NFL season, meaning I think he's only going to get better, which is a scary, scary thought. You have the Houston Texans team that also has a young up-and-coming star at the quarterback position that completely dismantled their offense and put in new parts to make it happen. The problem with that is you have a running back who was great and has missed seasons due to injury and now has something to prove, and he may not have the ability to prove it. You have a number one wide receiver, yes, a lot cheaper than your other number one wide receiver, but your other number one wide receiver ran every route in the route tree to perfection. Brandon Cooks only knows one route, and that's the 9. Go deep, go long, and catch it. That's it. That's all you're going to get from Brandon Cooks. Yes, you have Will Fuller, who has the talent to be a great wide receiver. He's pretty much shown he's made of glass. I just can't. The spread is 9. The Vegas spread is 9, and it's weird to say that I think you can give the points to Houston and you can feel comfortable. I really think what James said at the end of his prediction, I know he said he's going to give the Texans 31, but you could hear that was the fan in him talking. He mentioned that with all of these different pieces, 31 may not be a reality for this team, and that's what I think is going to happen to the Texans. I don't think without a preseason, without a regular preseason, without preseason games, this is going to be a team that's still looking for its feet, still looking to find its rhythm. And the Kansas City Chiefs at home are going to be right in rhythm. They're going to pick up right where they left off with that Super Bowl. And I think the Chiefs are going to steamroll the Texans. I think it's just going to be too easy. I'm not the kind of guy that gives you scores because I'm not really that, but I do, like I said, I think you can give the Texans 9, and I think you can feel real comfortable with that. If you want to get in touch with this show, nextfanup@gmail.com is the way to email us. If you've got some thoughts on these week 1 matchups, we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to include them in our Thursday show. You can tweet us at NFU Podcast. Facebook.com/NFU Podcast is a great way to get in touch with us as well. I want to remind you all that we did a wonderful show earlier this week on the state of race in the NFL in America. I'm super proud of how that episode came out. Really encourage you to go back and listen to that with an open mind and a full heart. Clear eyes, full hearts can't lose. But I really hope that more people listen to that show, and most of the money that we earn this month, we're going to donate to charity and for the cause of ending social injustices in the United States. I feel very strongly about this, and I want to make sure that you all are on board with us in that regard as well. And if you're not, I don't need you, quite frankly. That's the plain and simple of it. Let's talk about different ways that you can also interact with us. Our Pigskin Pick'em group is started. Yes, I got it started late, but that's a way that you can compete against us with your picks. You go to ESPN.com, the Pigskin Pick'em game, search for the next fan up. There is a link in the show notes, so you'll be able to click on that. The Eliminator game, you can join us in that as well. Again, our group is Next Fan Up. Go ahead and join us there. The link is in our show notes. I've tweeted it out as well. And, yeah, I mean, we are getting into the season. We are ready to go. We'll have our Thursday show, our official pick show coming to you tomorrow for all of the games coming up here in week 1 of the 2020 NFL season. Who would have thought? We had actually get it underway, but here we go. So for all the super fans, for Nick, for James, for everyone out there, here's our new finisher, Kofi Annan. There you had it.
Dear friends and colleagues, saying goodbye is never easy. I believe we can all feel proud of what we have done together, and through it all, you have maintained your professionalism and commitment and remained true to the spirit of the Charter. That principle.
We go out, we hit people in the mouth.